Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Next Step Forward, our conversation on race, representation, and running. I'm Varun Sriram. We're fortunate to be joined this evening by thought leaders and organization leaders from the Black community to discuss how to make impactful change through running. First up on our panel today, really excited to be joined by JL Alexander, CEO of Black Girls Run, and Edward Walton, co-founder of Black Men Run. JL and Edward, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me, sir.
Awesome. Well, really excited to chat with you guys. It's obviously a turbulent time in our country. We want to talk a little bit about that, but we also want to have a solutions-oriented conversation and look forward. But before we do that, for our audience, let's get to know you guys a little bit. So, JL, let's start with you. What's your background as CEO of Black Girls Run, a very large running organization that supports Black women? How did you get into running yourself?
Well, I was introduced to Black Girls Run a little over 8 years ago through my professional background of marketing and PR. I came on board when the organization started to really light a fire in the community and really have a strong presence across the country, and came on board as a volunteer. Wasn't even running at the time. Just started managing the brand and really became the right-hand person for our co-founders. And here we are 8 years later. Obviously started running over the course of that, and running has become a part of just my lifestyle. And now it's my full-time job. So I bought the company a little over 2 years ago, and now serve at the helm and leading the organization.
Edward, how about you? That's a great story, JL. Always interesting, how you work for a running organization and then it just fuels that passion to run yourself. I think a lot of people can relate to that story. Edward, how about you? Co-founder of Black Men Run. How did you come to the sport of running?
Well, I've been running all my life, either through elementary, high school, AAU, ran in college as well as the Navy team. So my co-founder and I, Jason Russell, founded Black Men Run almost 7 years ago. It'll be 7 years, July 26th of this year. It was founded for a way to have a standard and a shield for African-American men to have an outlet to continue to, be in charge of their physical well-being and mental health, right? So we just figured that running would be the vehicle, and it was also the ability to go out and have a way to meet other, Black runners that were at races when we didn't have a huge amount of representation. So Jason Russell and myself are the founders, and I'm the CMO for Black Men Run, which is the Chief Motivation Officer.
Very nice, very nice. And Black Men Run, sorry if you mentioned this, but when did it start? How long ago did, both your organizations, when did Black Men Run start originally?
It would be 7 years ago here in about a month. Yep. So
Nice.
2012, about a year after BGR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, BGR started in 2009.
2009.
We came around about a year and a half after. Yep.
Nice. So we're going to talk definitely a little bit more about both organizations. But in opening up, I definitely wanted to give both of you just a chance to share your perspective on what's happening in the country. Certainly this is not something new, but in recent months with Ahmaud Arbery and, George Floyd more recently, Breonna Taylor, there's been a lot more sort of light, I guess, to people outside of the Black community on some of these issues that are facing the Black community. JL, just starting with you, kind of what's your perspective on everything that's happening and how you're dealing with it personally?
Just candidly speaking, it's a lot. It's a lot to process, trying to understand where we are as a people, but also just where we are and how we fit into the country as well, and fit into the fabric of what's supposed to be, the United States of America. So it's a lot to kind of understand and to talk about your feelings right now, just even organizationally. We chatted about this. I've talked to a lot of people like over the last couple of weeks that I have not been in spaces in before, and trying to articulate those conversations, trying to maneuver through those sometimes very awkward conversations have been new territory. But we're in a very, just candidly speaking, it's really sad of what's going on in the country right now, that it's taken this much. It's taken another death. It's taken another person, another father, away from their family, away just from just life in general, for us to get where we are now. And so this is not a new story. I think social media and the advancement of technology has just put it on the forefront, where people cannot ignore it now. And now we've hit a peak of now people realize that they just can't turn away from it, and we have to create some change behind it.
Edward, how about you? You're in Georgia. Obviously with the incident with the mod happened. Not to say that it's a problem that's isolated to one state, but what's your perspective?
I mean, everything's in line with what Jay said. It is exhausting. There is a lot going on. And, I think my biggest struggle is finding those that are willing to have that candid and open conversation. I think my struggle has been to try to extrapolate what happened to the young man here in Georgia and not make it about a Black man running that was essentially just murdered. But we look into the things that led up to that, right? Which is the day in the life of an African American, particularly men, around over policing, profiling, random violence. And I welcome the hard and challenging conversations that sometimes people find awkward, because that gives you the opportunity to have greater impact, to talk about the underlying and systemic issues that are contributing to something that you now have focus on. Because one thing, that it was a young African American male that was killed by doing something that was supposedly being used to take care of his health. And then number two is that, as Jay said, the advancement in social media and technology help expose what we've known, right? We are not making this up as a people. And what happened to Mr. Floyd, what I believe was a high watermark and the tipping point that has energized those who would stand idle and now realize we have to make a change. This is not only bad, for everyone, it's getting progressively worse. It's difficult. It's a lot to consume. But I do believe within this time, it's just the time for real change to come about.
And, one of the things, I guess, throughout history that people have turned to and looked to that can impact change is athletics, and running being one of those things as well. I want to talk to you both kind of about this in a two-pronged way. Number one, talk about what your organizations are doing to support the Black community and Black runners, and why you feel like running has a place in the Black community and can be impactful. And then secondly, for the running community at large, talk a little bit about how we can all, be better allies and better support Black runners and, as a running community as a whole. So let's first start with both of your organizations. JL, with Black Girls Run, what's the overall mission of Black Girls Run? How do you guys approach things day to day in terms of trying to advance running? And you talked a little bit about this, but what drew you to it?
Yeah, so I think probably Ed and I can probably tag team on this,
Right.
because we are our niche and the why we were created really fills the same gap within the running industry. At races, Black people are just peppered in. And so there was a lack of representation from the Black community within these spaces. And we needed to create a community that filled this void, that created a sisterhood, created a brotherhood of people that were very like-minded, of people that wanted to advance their community through health and physical activity and making us healthier as a people as a whole. So that's what attracted me to it. That was why we created the organization, because it was definitely looking at where we are as a people and that we need to change these numbers, for us to become a healthier people, it's going to have to be all hands on deck, and it's going to have to be be very important for communities like Black Girls Run and Black Men Run to exist, so people can find where they fit in, whereas before we existed, that there was no space for that.
And to give more commentary to what Jay said, it was needed, because you're absolutely correct, especially in the realm of distance running. There was always the perception that African American men, did not run distance because that wasn't a cool thing to do coming up in the traditional sports, football, basketball, baseball, track. So I wanted to do this, and Jason and I said, hey, we need to find a way to bring, African-American men and give them something that holds them accountable for their physical well-being. And once again, a standard so that when you go to a race, you see someone that looks like you, that you can go up and walk to and shake their hands and ask them a question to realize, hey, this is where we can congregate, this is where we can support each other and do all of these things. It was needed, quite frankly, and the validation, unfortunately, came in the form of COVID-19. Within our active members, while we have had some that have been infected, we have zero fatality rate within Black Men Run as far as our active members, runners, and leadership, because it gave us the ability to resist the disease, but it also proved that we were being affected by this particular ailment disproportionately, not because we're genetically inferior, but when you look at systemic lack of ample health care, diet, career makes a big advance. I think I mentioned that. The more senior you are in your career, believe it or not, that translates into your physical well-being. You get to take time off. You don't have to worry about your job. You get to go run. And then the biggest thing that can't be understated is the fellowship between, the women of Black Girls Run. We see it. We emulated it. Black Men Run. We hold each other accountable. There's nothing like not feeling like going out for a run. Then once someone of your fellow members says, hey, we got to run today. You got to be there. So that accountability is one of the other reasons that we have. And that's our three pillars. MAC, M-A-C, moderation, accountability, and consistency. Those are the three pillars of Black Men Run.
Now, you talked about the fellowship, the community. We're in, with COVID-19, as you alluded to, Ed, we're in a totally unprecedented time right now where we can't get together and gather with our community the way we want to. How are you guys dealing with that? Community is such an important thing of what both of you guys offer. What are you doing now in these current times to support the community when you can't, show up and run together?
One of the things that I did is have a more regular cadence with my leadership team, my captains. I believe that BGR has ambassadors. And so those are directly attached to the chapters of the geographic region. So I wanted more check-ins with them, making sure that they were checking in their guys, and then just having the guys check in about what they were doing for exercise, and then having mental health check-ins where we were having psychologists, psychiatrists, and counselors come to our leadership calls to talk about how are you doing? What are you doing? And then, we talked about, there will come a time that we will get together again, but we need to do it safely. So we had medical doctors come in and give us, that happen to be runners, they give us guidance on how to run in a social distancing new reality. And so we are using the very tools that started us off, which is social media, to make sure we stay connected, right? And that has worked pretty well. Now, you've had some individuals that are comfortable running alongside each other because they know each other, or they may be family members. But as far as mass gathering, I tell my members, this is just like distance run. Patience is something that's needed. So have patience, and things will come back to a new normal. And that's what we've done. I think the constant communication is the biggest thing.
Dale, how about you guys?
Yeah, we quickly took a pivot very early on to be able to continue to stay connected, to be able to serve our communities. So we've had a stay-home fitness calendar for the last few months where we were actually able to uplift our members in other areas that they showed expertise. So whether Zumba or strength training or kickboxing or just meditation. So each evening we have a member from across the country that's leading a session on one of our social media platforms. Just an opportunity for us to still connect virtually, to still provide some free opportunities for women to stay healthy and active during this time as well. And that's been a big thing for us. And then also just create these spaces online where women can talk openly and candidly about how they're feeling. I think the mental health has been a big thing for people to be able to process their feelings. This idea of staying alone together is still, very new to all of us. As much as we stay on social media, the idea of wanting to connect in person and feel a hug and see people outside of our household, that is a a real feeling. So, you know, we needed to figure out some things that we could do in the interim, since we weren't able to physically get together.
You know, in talking about community and talking about health, kind of feeds into my next question for you both. But in terms of what makes both of you passionate about getting Black people involved with running, you know, what we just talked about was obviously a big part of it. You know, the health and the sense of community. JL, I was reading an interview with you from maybe a few months ago where you were also talking about kind of, you know, teaching people to like make health a priority, where you might, because running, obviously there's an investment involved with it. If you want to race, if you want to train at a certain level, and, you know, you might have to shift around some of that investment, say in beauty or something else to prioritize your health. So I guess, yeah, I'll lead with you this time. Like, where does that passion come from? You know, why do you feel so strongly that you want to spread running more into the Black community?
Well, I think it might not even be just specifically running. I think it's just the passion and the purpose that we're trying to create healthier communities, and that we just want people to move. Just culturally and notoriously, we've seen that the Black community, and even more recently with COVID-19, that these pre-existing conditions of diabetes and high blood pressure and being overweight, those are things that have continued to impact our community, and it's not going to change overnight. That just going out for a run is not going to change your lifestyle, that this has to become something that you do on a regular basis. You know, it's not just running, it's not just working out, it's conversations of wellness and nutrition as well. So I think it's looking at the larger purpose of how BGR fits into just the fabric of becoming a healthier community that really fuels my passion. That, you know, we're talking to people, I'm motivating women that never ran before or never gave up smoking or on blood pressure medication, and now they've found BGR to be that vehicle to get them to a healthier space. And they just might be walking and running their first mile. Or it might be someone that has been healthy and active most of their life, and now they're an ultra marathoner, but they need a community to continue to hold them to be accountable. So no matter where they are in their spectrum, BGR fits into where they need to be, to continue to push towards becoming healthier.
Absolutely. We have the same mission. We have a lot of the same tactics, and we definitely have the same goals. We do the same thing. You know, it is about having that fellowship and that informal sense of accountability and, you know, responsibility. And so getting our guys involved helps, right? So we look at it from the entire spectrum, everything from stress management. I like to tell everyone that Black Men Run is not a run club. We're not a health-minded organization. We're a social network of influence. And so as many times as you see us talking about running and health and posting numbers, it's just quite, you know, normal for me to reach out to my network of Black Men Run members to say, hey, I'm hiring. I need someone that has particular IT skills. Someone needs something like, for instance, I told the members of Black Men Run that when these businesses start back up, support the businesses that supported us. If a small business opens back up and because they've been shut down and the AC stopped working, or they don't have computers or something else, and you have that skill, you go help them. You go help get that building ready for them to open back up and things along that line and be impactful in your community. Now, my passion around running is to just give guys an outlet to go back and, you know, do something. I like winning. I am a hyper-competitive guy. We have internal race teams. We have teams that go out and compete on the national level, master team and such. So I like to get people involved, give them a routine, give them someone or something that they can push against and lean on. And it also lends to fellowship with other organizations like BGR, right? You know, you have to expand that and not just be your own island. So, and running is our golf course. You'd be surprised some of the topics and conversations that come up in some of our group runs, right? And when we finish up a group run, people are still hanging around for 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour afterwards. Because besides college, the military, this is the chance that you make friendships and acquaintances that you may not have done, because it's been proven that once we get into our mid 30s and 40s, we stop making new friends and associates outside of work. And this has allowed us to do that. I have 15,000 plus members. I can almost within about 5 minutes tell you almost who every one of them, who they are if I've met them before. They remember me and I remember them. And this is the strength of it. We have a very fraternal-like organization. Mm-hmm.
It's powerful to hear for both about the impact that the community of both organizations have. So the next topic I want to move on to both of you guys with is this idea of allyship. You know, so a lot of people outside the Black community, you know, perhaps it's too late now, but they see what's happening and they feel like we need to be part of the solution, you know, in a stronger way than we have before. In the context of the running community, you guys have been in the running community, you know, experienced a lot of things in the running community. How can the running community be better allies to both Black organizations like the ones that you're heads of, and then just, you know, generally speaking to individual Black runners?
Just candidly speaking, I think that's probably the best way to speak these days.
That's why we have you back. That's why we have you both on. Have you both on to speak candidly.
Yeah, you know, the question of, even after a week, I'm exhausted of the question of what can I do to help? I'm exhausted. I don't know what you can do to help in race. Like, that's the ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think we have to take a step back and make sure, like Ed said, look at the authenticity of it to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that your organization or you as an individual, you're asking the question for the right reason. I don't think, you know, those awkward conversations have to happen, and no one really knows how to lean into those conversations right now, but they absolutely have to happen. So, you know, one thing that I say to those organizations, to those brands, to those individuals is that, you know, as runners, as a running community, we're a very special group of people. We absolutely are. And running is an opportunity right now to really bridge the gap in terms of these social injustices, because the pavement is an even playing ground. We're going to step up to that start line just like you will. We're going to tie our running shoes just like you will. And we're going to finish this 3-miler, half a marathon, what have you, just like you are, no matter how slow or fast. All of us are showing up as runners. And so that conversation, these awkward conversations of how to bridge the gap between Black and white or what have you, they have to happen. And so this is more than an opportunity right now to really, you know, shake hands across the table to start these conversations of how do we move to a solution. But I think the first place of where we have to start is making sure that it comes from a very authentic place, and that you as an individual or as an organization aren't just jumping on a bandwagon because you see fire around you, or you see everyone else making a statement and now you feel like you have to do something too because you don't want to get left behind. And then the other thing with me, and I'll kind of end my bout with that, is that it's okay to say, I don't know. People want to say, you know, my organization has not done this well. And a lot of people are saying, okay, now that you've said that, what's next? It's okay to say, I don't know what's next. It's okay to just kind of make small steps just to start the conversation. We know how we got here, but it's not going to change overnight, and we're not going to have solutions over the night either. But like I said at the beginning, both Ed and I, this is absolutely a prime opportunity for us to start making some impactful change.
Yep, and I have to mirror the sentiments and comments of Jay. I think you guys sort of get an idea of how I operate. I'm a very straightforward person, not to the point of being rude, but I'll ask you, are you an ally or are you an opportunist? And so I will ask these organizations that didn't know what to do, I'll just ask a simple question, and not in a way to discourage them. I say, why now? It's now the time that you really want to get involved to make change. Because in 400 years, and numerous, you know, social uprisings, as well as the civil rights movement that I believe we're on the cusp of another one, it should give you the game plan that this is not something that is short term. You either have to be in it for the long run to make change. And so, I lead by example, not by giving examples. And so when I see, these communities, I say, let's just not have events and activity to congregate, but we should have these to communicate and understand. Because what you see is a lot of time in these events, we come out, everybody's in a sense of calm and unification, and everybody's happy. Well, that's because you're facing a common enemy. You're facing that 26.2 miles to go. Where everybody's on the same page. Yeah, everybody wants to help everybody out. But then once the race is over, you go back to where you are. So what I would say to these running communities, we're open at Black Men Run. Trivia question. We've had some people that are not Black that have run our chapters before. And here's a trivia question. One of our chapters for the first beginning of it was run by a woman because she couldn't wait on her husband to start the chapter. But eventually I handed over. But we are always welcome. And that's just something that how Black people are. We will welcome you, right? So when you come to your run, you won't be shamed. You'll be pulled into the brotherhood. That doesn't happen on the other side too often. And so I would say the running community needs to have an opportunity and should have a deliberate, set of actions to say, hey, come here and understand and talk, and not just come here to run and then go back to your safe spots. And that should also happen to not just the community, but running organizations like UCAN.
No question. I think that's so powerful what both you said. I think one thing that resonated with me is it starts from a place, whether it's a company or an individual, of building an authentic relationship, right? You can only support, understand, help people who you know. Otherwise, you're not going to feel their pain. You're not going to know how to help them. Like when we were speaking, prior to this, right? You were giving the example. It's not just about writing a check, right? It's about like actually knowing the people, understanding what their needs are, and figuring out how you can make a meaningful impact in that. So I appreciate all those sentiments. I think it's something that, all companies, UCAN included, have to take to heart and move forward in that direction.
You just have to get to the common denominator. There are a lot of things that are affected by it. The separation of not similar people, from everything from running to social events to where you work to everything else. The common denominator is in racism and bigotry and hate and publicly exposed. Let me give you an example. I'm a huge supporter of the Me Too movement. And the outrage that came around that had men thinking, oh my God, did I do something? Right? Did I say something inappropriate? Am I going to be fired? Did I touch that woman? Is she going to tell? Exchange Me Too for racism, and how many people would you have working at your company? If we went after those same individuals who did the same type of stuff and see what would they be thinking? But they don't, because they don't believe that there is a serious consequence to hate, bigotry, and they perpetuate that. And until you can honestly talk about what is the underlying cancer of this country and society, you can run till you fall out, you can talk till you're blue in the face, you can ally, partner up, cut a check, say what you're going to say. You got to cut out the underlying problem. And it won't be easy, because there is no compelling reason for the system to change itself when the people in the system are benefiting from the system. Why change? Well, I was born with white privilege, and I'm going to keep using it. It's like Superman. If you chose Superman not to use your powers, he'll go, okay. Now, if you tell Superman to give up your powers, whoa, not giving up the powers. I promise you I'll use them for good, but I'm not giving them up. That's what it's like, right? And so until you can fix that and have that frank, uncomfortable conversation, we'll be right back here.
Yeah. But
getting back to this same spot is not it's not something I don't want to visit where we may be heading in this country if we don't fix that.
No question. JL, in closing for both of you guys, anything we didn't cover, anything else you want to speak to? I do want to give both of you guys an opportunity before we sign off to tell folks where they could find out more about Black Men Run and Black Girls Run. But before we do that, JL, I'll open it up to you.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to just share some light of, how Black Girls Run is impacting the community. And when we're back to whatever the new normal is and reconvening in mass gatherings, invite everyone out on the pavement with us, to support us, to push our community forward. And it's going to take an all hands on deck approach for sure. Anyone can find us at blackgirlsrun.com or on all social media fronts as well. We have 70 groups across the country, 250,000 members. So I can guarantee that there is a group close to you as well. And then I'll also like to share that we have teamed up Black Men Run as well as National Black Marathoners Association as well as Girl Trek with the Civil Rights Race Series, the National Civil Rights Museum, as well as to support the NAACP through this time of social injustice and fighting the cause out in the community for the 1 million miles for justice. This is an opportunity for all of our organizations to come together to pledge at least 25 miles, $25 as we support the NAACP, and that kicks off June 15th. So really encourage everyone, non-Black, Black, to really support the cause. And again, putting some action behind what we say we want to do, what we're asking, what you can do. And that's a way that you can step up and start to kind of create change in the community.
And how do people sign up to get to be part of that?
They can just go to either just Google search like 1 million miles for justice for the NAACP or the Civil Rights Race Series based in Atlanta is the race series that is the head partner on the event.
Yeah,
that sounds amazing.
Same thing for us. You could go to blkmenrun.com or just Google or look for us at any social media outlet. And then, we're also in conjunction with Latinos on the Run that we're doing a unity run, and we went from just 2 organizations to BGR and numerous. I think that the graphics and the number of clubs that have joined on, it's hugely encouraging. The other thing would be, running communities and run groups that are not primarily focused around Blacks or brown people. You should form unity runs. I'm seeing that, organizations like ourselves, the onus is put upon us to put unity runs and ask you guys to come. When I say you guys, I mean non, Black and brown people. But I'm saying that the onus shouldn't be upon the affected to be, the being affected by this to be the ones that have to try to fix the problem, right? So, I'm looking for other organizations, right? Because you never see them having, other groups having unity runs. Right? It's always, we have to band together to be able to do these things. So we need to have that outpouring to be able to do that. And so we're absolutely going to support the Million Miles for Justice, the Selma Run next year, and the NAACP event. And this is going to be ongoing. And I do believe going forward, you're going to see a more concerted and a more focused collaboration between Black Men Run and BGR. We're powerful organizations. And one of the things I like to do when we talk about how powerful, monetary impact. We're not going to go, we're not going to buy, and we're not going to come if we believe you're not friendly to us. And if BGR say they're not doing it, we aren't doing it either. You're not going to undermine them. You're not going to be able to do the conquer and divide anymore. That won't work. And so I'm telling these organizations, are you an ally or are you an opportunity? You'll be found out.
That's right. And hey, it's for everybody to, like you said, it's for everybody to prove that it's not a flash in the pan, but it's a sustained movement. That's what it's going to take. It's what it's going to take from all of us. Edward, JL, really appreciate both you guys giving up your time today, giving us your perspective on what's happening. We're going to be back with a couple other guests next, but hope this isn't the only time we have you on our platform. Look forward to having you back to discuss a whole bunch.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Send me your mailing address so that I can send you a Black Men Run shirt and Jay can send Katie.
Love it.
I will wear it. I will wear it and run with it proudly. No question about it. Edward, JL, thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our conversation on race representation in running. I'm Varun Sriram. For our next segment, we've got a fantastic panel of guests. Please join me in welcoming Tony Reed from the National Black Marathoners Association, Elisa Harvey, former track and field standout, Masters world record holder. She's still getting it done, still going strong. And finally, John Rankin, pro runner, alternate for the 2008 Olympic team, a standout athlete from UCLA, ran really, really fast miles. We've got some fast milers here with us today, for sure. But welcome all. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Tony, I see you shaking your head. You're not in the miler group?
Oh, no. I was the person who was the fifth man on a four-man high school relay team. Which basically meant I was faster than the average person, but too slow to go beyond high school.
Well,
so no, I was not a speed demon.
Right. Well, with the number of marathons you've run, Tony, you've sure got something figured out with this whole running thing. But before we dive into our conversation today, why don't we give all of you a chance to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Elisa, we'll start with you. What's your background in the sport of running, and what drives your passion for running?
Well, let's see. So I started out in running because I was a little girl that stayed by herself a lot in the house, and I watched the Olympic Games, and I fell in love with Wilma Rudolph. So I wanted to be a sprinter. And so as I grew up and went to high school, I joined the track team. And sure enough, 100, 200 meters, second, thirds, never won a race, but they pushed me or tried me in the 4x4. We won. They put me in the 800 and I won the event, and then the mile, and up I went. So I became a middle distance runner. High school, got the whole All-American. I was a top high school recruit to University of Tennessee. I went there, ran for all 4 years, NCAA champion, 1986 in the 1500 meters. From there, I went on to the elite training. I was with Nike for many years, and I traveled overseas. Again, track and field, Olympic trials, 88, 92, 96, and 2000. Actually, 2004, I also qualified as a 42-year-old or something like that. In the middle of that, I got interested in distance running. So I started doing 5Ks and 10Ks. They were a great place for me to make a little extra cash. And I got into marathoning. I worked at a running store, and I wanted to know what it was like. So I did the Richmond Marathon and qualified for the Olympic trials. And that's been my thing. I've been doing roads and track, and then road races and track for the last 30 years.
You qualified for the Olympic trials just in Georgia, right? The most recent Olympic trials? Or
no, my last Olympic trials was 2004.
Oh, 2004. Okay, so yeah. Right. So that was in the marathon?
No, that was 2000 was a marathon, and everything else was track and field.
Track and field. Excellent. Tony, how about you? You've been a veteran of the sport. I think I saw that you've run over 100 marathons in your life in all 50 states. So the marathon, you're no stranger to the marathon. Tell us about your background in the sport of running and what drives your passion to run.
Okay, well, when I was about 8 years old, I was diagnosed with a pre-diabetic condition, and the doctor said I would go on insulin by the time I was a teenager. But I went to a high school where it was mandatory you participate in a sport 2 out of the 3 seasons. And I ended up losing weight. In college, I read a book where they said diabetics who were dependent on insulin could either decrease their insulin intake or go completely off of it if they maintain a fitness program. So I ended up setting a lifetime goal of averaging about 3 miles a day of running. And since 1979 is when I started my running journal, I've run over 45,000 miles of running. And I'll be 65 next month, and I'm still not on insulin. Along the way with those 45,000 miles, like you mentioned, I've run over 100 marathons. In fact, 131 marathons to be exact, in all 50 states. And I'm the first Black in the world to run marathons on all 7 continents. On the administrative side of things, in addition to being a co-founder and executive director of the National Black Marathoners Association, I've also been on the board of directors for the Dallas Marathon since 2009. And I was on the board of directors for Running USA from 2015 to 2019. And unfortunately, I have the body of a sprinter and the mentality of a distance runner. And those two just don't mesh too well together.
Well, what's remarkable, I mean, with all those races, running a marathon on every continent, I mean, running has literally been your outlet to see the world. I think that's pretty remarkable. And you must have just a whole depth of interesting stories from that experience.
Yes.
John, how about yourself? So, like I mentioned in your intro, you know, standout athlete at UCLA, and you've taken your running to higher levels than that. How did you get started in the sport?
Yeah, honestly, very similar to Elisa. I was inspired by the Olympics as well. Michael Johnson was actually my guy. 1996, 14 years old, laying on the floor in the living room, just watching the 96 games. And I mean, the guy had USA across his chest. His chest is out, looks like Superman running around the track in those golden spikes. That was it. I was like, I know I love another MJ. I love Michael Jordan, but when I was a kid and I was only a basketball player. But the moment I saw that at the end of that summer, I was like wearing my basketball shoes and basketball shorts and going up to my elementary school, 7 o'clock in the morning, running around that gravel dirt field at my local elementary school, trying to get ready for high school cross country because of Michael, Johnson. And so that's what sparked it for me, was seeing the 96 Olympics. The Olympic dream was born that summer. And I had no idea what it was to be a track and field athlete, but I just knew that what I saw resonated with me. Even though I was a basketball player, and that was the only sport that I had known, I had to listen to my heart and I had to give it a try. And it was a little bit tough for my dad because he's like, man, I've been training you and your brother for like 10 years to be really good basketball players. And we were actually pretty good. At 14, I could actually dunk a basketball. And I was, being considered, at least a future starter for my high school team going into my freshman year. And I played freshman basketball, did really well. And my sophomore year, I had the opportunity to go play varsity. So it wasn't that basketball wasn't going very well. It was just that I felt like there was something there for me in running. It is interesting being an African-American and trying to do the distance running thing. Even in the mid 90s, I didn't have a lot of examples, at least a reference. So I wanted to be a sprinter, but I tried the sprinting thing, and kind of like what Tony was saying, wasn't really in the cards for me, at least not when I first started. I ended up being able to split a 46-second quarter mile, which is pretty fast for a pure middle distance and long distance runner. But that wasn't until I got into college and I kind of got a feel for the running. So 96 Olympics is what sparked the running. After my freshman year, got to try track and field. That was it. Once I got into the sport, I quit basketball and I never looked back. It's taken me all over the world. Very fortunate I got to run for UCLA, broke a couple of records that still stand to this day, which makes me feel, it's funny, I'm 38. I don't feel 38, but boy, that was 15 years ago. I broke their mile record and the 1500-meter record that still stands today. Hoping that those kids break it. You always like to see your alma mater succeeding. And so, but very fortunate to be considered the greatest middle distance runner in UCLA history, and made the Olympic team as an alternate 2008, the 1500 meters. In 2000, I was diagnosed with a kidney disease. And so that was a little bit of a battle. Mentally put a big, I think, hitch in my efforts to continue to rise in the sport. That was 12 years ago. And where I'm at now is just continuing to give back to the sport, trying to find ways to inspire the future generations, and appreciate the opportunity to kind of share a little bit about at least my experience as an African-American male in this sport, because the sport's given so much to me. I do feel like there's a lack of representation in this sport, but I do believe that there's opportunity to change that. And I'm excited that we can share our stories personally, but also share our thoughts on how we could take what we've experienced and what has been such great examples we have seen that inspired us to get into the sport, and hopefully not only be that example, but inspire more people to participate in the sport, so we can create more of those examples and inspire more people,
One of the interesting things, so I ran my first marathon in 1982. And I remember standing at the starting line of the marathon, and there were about 600 runners there and only a handful of blacks. And the white runners around me started commenting that I was too big to run a marathon. I probably should run, some other sport, but definitely not a marathon. It just wasn't for me. And, but little did they know was that, as both John and Elisa were talking about, is I had a role model. I had been reading books. I was avid African-American history buff. And in reading this gentleman's autobiography, I found myself going, well, if this man could literally as a high school student lead a protest as a result of him setting a record in a mile. This guy set the high school record in a mile in 1951. And the state he was in refused to recognize it because it was held as a segregated track meet. So that next fall, he literally led a walkout of the black high schools in St. Louis, Missouri, which is my hometown. And as a result of him leading that walkout, they ended up integrating not only track and field and cross country, but all the sports in the state of Missouri. And he came back that next year, and he, of course, ended up winning the state mile title. And 4 years later, his brother came back and set the national high school record in the mile in 4 minutes, 19 seconds. And I mean, it was just amazing. As these white guys around me were talking, telling me, that marathoning was not the sport for me. Again, I thought about my role model. Well, this guy ran from LA to New York City in 1976 and averaged over 40 miles a day. And I told myself, if he could average over 40 miles a day, I shouldn't have any problems at all with finishing a 26.2 mile marathon. That gentleman happened to have been Dick Gregory. And a lot of people weren't aware of his accomplishments as a distance runner. They kind of know him as a social activist. But when you think about it, his social activism started as a result of being a distance runner and not being recognized for his accomplishment.
Wow.
I think for both, all three of you actually mentioned this, when we talk about representation and the impact that it has, I think it comes through in that story where it's, representation is what gives you the motivation to see somebody like yourself doing something amazing and want to push yourself to do that same thing, right? All three of you, I think, talked about it. Elisa, for you, as you navigated, the professional running world and as you kind of continued to have a lot of success in running, how do you view that element of being, somebody that other Black girls, younger Black girls can look at and say like, hey, running is something that, in through you feeling that they can do something because they see what you're doing? Like, is that something that you consider? Is that something you take on at all?
Actually, it is. And I was actually surprised about 10 years ago when I used to run over a local track in my neighborhood. A gentleman came up to me and showed me this paper. It was a report that his daughter did on me. And it was about, I forget the topic, but it had to do with me, a local woman in the neighborhood that did this. She ran the Army 10 miler. And it was just, the whole article was about, the whole paper report was about me, maybe women that inspire her or something. So it made me realize that just like I was looking at Wilma Rudolph, this youngster was looking at me and giving me a role model. So yes, I do feel like now as a coach, I've coached athletes, and I do see the role that it plays when you have someone who does what they want to do or that shines and does, big things. My winning the Army 10 miler as an African-American woman is a unique thing. Doing it 4 times is also pretty unique also, but it just gives that girl that is thinking, well, what should I do? What might I do in the future? It gives her another opportunity.
Now, Elisa, for both you and John, being in the professional running realm, you mentioned you ran for Nike. You've had to, I guess, deal with it from the sponsorship side of things. Can you speak to your, we'll continue with you, Elisa, and then we'll kick it over to John. Can you just maybe speak to your experience and how race played a factor as you looked for opportunities and navigated your way in the professional running world?
Well, let's see. I've got stories, but where do I begin?
I know that's an open-ended question, right? I'm giving you a long sort of large area to talk about.
Well, I think first of all, there were times for an elite runner, you try to find a way to either get a sponsor that's going to have you be able to support your training without having a job, or either cut some of the expenses so you can afford to have a shorter job. I did it back in 1992. I got with the Olympic Job Opportunities Program. You simply had to be qualified for the Olympic trials, and then they get you with the company and you get a part-time job. So mine was over at the JCPenney's mall, or JCPenney's. I worked at the mall and I was in security. And this particular job I loved. I would wear a little skirt and nylons, and I'd go around and sometimes help with looking at shoplifters. But this one day, this is how kind of race intersects my life. One day, one of my coworkers came into the room, and she didn't see me because I was behind the wall where the cameras were, where you watch the shoplifters. And she was about 50 years old, and she was a sweet lady that we talked about her kids, and me as a youngster. I was 26 years old at the time. She says she came in and she announced, "There's an N-word on camera 3." And I was stunned because she used the racial epithet. And the manager was right there, and we had to I left the room. I think I might've cried. I can't remember, but I never said anything. I never talked to anybody about it, but here I am training for the Olympic team, trying to make them, and I have to deal with this kind of a stress. But as an athlete, you learn how to just, brush it off and keep going. So that was something that kind of impacted my life. But you kind of, as African Americans do, you keep going. Another incident, maybe not too long after that, living in California, I went to a road race where, again, I'm trying to make a little extra money so maybe I can buy a little, better food or more vitamins or whatever you do as an elite athlete. I went to a road race where it was announced that the winner, the top, male and female, will get $150. So I got in the race, ran it. I was chasing down this one local woman, and I blew her away, but I won the race. And at the awards ceremony, they were saying, "Well, you weren't local," and they weren't going to give me the 150. They're going to give it to the second place girl. And I think, it went on for like 30 minutes. They were discussing it amongst themselves. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Are they really not going to give me the money?" Like I was not a California native or something, but eventually they gave me the money. There was times where I would go to a meet, and I literally, at one meet I went to, I never got a race. I never got my prize money at all. There's one big event I went to out in Cape Cod, the Falmouth Road Race, where it was a hot day, and it's always hot, of course, at Cape Cod in August, and is a 7.1 mile race. And near the end, it gets like 79 degrees and 89% humidity. And I've had heat issues, so I know how important it is to get the water. Well, the neighbors in the yard, they spray water for the runners to go by. And I could see up ahead that I was, about mile 6, I think it was. And I saw the spray and all the runners getting sprayed ahead of me. So I was going right for that. And as soon as I got up right to the spray, the man yanked it from me, and I didn't get any water and went on by. What was happening then was that was near, there was 98. That was near when Catherine Deriba and a lot of the top Africans were coming in and getting a lot of the money. And there was some anxiety about that or something. They didn't like to see a lot of the African Americans or Africans get money. So maybe they thought I was an African, I didn't matter, but I didn't get any water that day.
Wow.
Yeah, those are all terrible to hear about. I'm sorry you had to go through all that.
Yeah.
Crazy. John, what's your experience as you've navigated the elite running world? You've raced and run and trained in a lot of different parts of the country. What's your experience been like?
It's interesting because, and I've had a lot of conversations about this. So, for me, I'm not going to even pretend at all that I've had the exact same experiences. And you and I kind of talked about this the other day, Varun, about what my experiences have been like. And in many ways, I believe that, I don't know if it's because of where I've grown up. I don't know if it's because I have a lighter complexion as a black male, or if I've grown up in San Diego and I didn't grow up in a lot of, I don't know. I didn't grow up a lot in a predominantly black community. It was more Hispanic or Caucasian, maybe even more Asian in a lot of ways. So I don't know if because I wasn't growing up a lot of Black people, I feel like I was probably in some ways, or in many ways experiencing subtle racism, where it was probably happening all the time. I just wasn't aware of it, you know? And it's partly because of the way, you know, my parents, the way that they raised my siblings and I, they focused on, you know, equality. They focused on loving everybody, embracing differences. I mean, they just taught us the right way that every parent should teach their kids. Don't focus on, you know, just your cultural background, your ethnicity, as if like that's the only thing that exists. There's all kinds of cultures and ethnicities to embrace and to celebrate, and don't make your own, you know, something where you make it an issue, you know. And so I never focused on those things, but I'm pretty sure that even as I started competing at the professional level, there were things happening. I'm sure maybe even my contract negotiations with Nike, there was probably something going on compared to my peers who were right around the same time as I was running. I don't know. That would all be assumption, you know. And so ultimately, I just know that I think it's very clear, even though my experiences weren't as blatant, that I think we all know better by now that that doesn't mean it wasn't happening. And I'm grateful to my parents for not giving me the strength and the courage and the ability to, you know, not look for it, and to not be caught up in it, and to not consider my skin color as a negative. But the reality is, it has been. And I would like to say that for anybody that can relate to my experience in terms of being Black, but not necessarily having experienced blatant racism, to know that more likely than not, you were definitely being profiled, you were definitely being discriminated against, and you just weren't seeing it, but it was definitely happening. And I know that in every corner of this country, in every single state, no matter where you live, no matter how it looks, it's happening. And that's the point of, I think, why we're having this discussion today. It isn't just because it was apparent that it was happening, it's because it was happening even when we thought it wasn't happening. And that's where I want to come from as far as my position. I don't want to pretend 1 second that I've experienced what we've been seeing in the media. But I've been frustrated. I know that it's been hard, and it's hard for Blacks in this country. And I know that it's always been this way, and I've always been aware of that. And I'm hopeful that that's one of the clearer things about it, is that just because we're not seeing it, just because it wasn't caught on tape, that it wasn't happening, or that it isn't happening to you. So that's been my experience, even on the circuit. I'm cool with everybody. I treat everybody equally. I never focused on their culture, the skin color. I focused on character, and I always gave everybody the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, prove me wrong, you know. And I think that's what a lot of Blacks are extremely upset about, is that we haven't been able to get the benefit of the doubt. We're immediately put into a pigeonhole. We're immediately considered, you know, unequal and not given the same equal pay, equal opportunities, things like that. Even when it comes to sponsorship, we know it's happening, you know? So at the end of the day, my experience wasn't blatant, but I'm pretty sure, looking back, and especially now that we're all even more woke than ever before, that it was happening, and that it needs to stop, and that if we don't have these discussions, it's going to continue. And so that's where I'm coming from as far as the experience. It's not blatant, it was very subtle, but I know it was there.
One of the common threads, I guess, between both John and Elisa is both of them were inducted into the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame. And we started the Hall of Fame in 2013 as a result of someone contacting us, contacting the Black Marathoners Association, and they were asking us, you know, have you ever heard of this lady named Marilyn Bevins? I had never heard of her. And in fact, when the person contacted me, they said, you know, they wanted to interview her for a book. So I go out and I start doing research on her, and I'm asking myself, why is he asking me about this lady who placed second in the 1977 Boston Marathon, who won the 1977 Maryland Marathon, who was ranked as one of the top 10 fastest women in marathons in the world at that time, and who placed second in the Chicago Marathon. After doing even more research, I found a YouTube video of her being interviewed as a high school track coach, and I was stunned to find out she was African American who was born and raised in Baltimore.
Wow.
As a result of that, I ran to my board of directors for the Black Marathoners Association and was talking to them about it and said, you know, we have individuals out there who have done some great things. We just didn't know about them. And the running community as a whole wasn't even promoting those individuals. So we started talking about, you know, are there any other possible African Americans, you know, who have done things, you know, equally as well or better? And someone said, well, there's this guy named Ted Corbett. You know, and I'm going, and bear in mind, I have been running since 1969. And we're looking at 2013. And I'm like, who are these people? And
Right.
so the guy goes, oh yeah, you know, he was an Olympian in the 1952 marathon for the US. And then he said, what really caught my eye, he said, yeah, he was the guy that was responsible for how we go about measuring courses, road race courses. As soon as he said that, I grabbed a book of mine. It's here, it's called The Complete Marathoner. So when I started training for marathons, you know, there really weren't that many people around, so you ended up having to read books about it. And when he mentioned about his course measurements, I said, oh, I remember reading that in this book. So in this book, they have this chapter. I don't know if you can see this, but they have a quote from a guy named Ted Corbett. And I thought, well, is the guy sitting there with his hands in his head in his hands? Is that Ted Corbett? Then they have this whole chapter on course measurement. And they have this black runner, and they have a quote from Ted Corbett. In this entire chapter where they talked about the course measurement, they never mentioned Ted Corbett's name. And they never said that the photo, or at least it's a drawing, was of Ted Corbett. Until you go 200 pages later, they mention Ted Corbett was instrumental in the course measurement techniques. As we were looking at this, we said, you know what? We need to do something. We need to show African Americans that we indeed excel in distance running. And as a result of that, we started the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame. Now, bear in mind, the New York Road Runners Club, where Ted was affiliated with, Ted was the first president of that organization. He was the third president of the RRCA. I mean, administratively, he had done a lot in distance running. The New York Road Runners Club had a Hall of Fame. The first year, they didn't induct Ted. The second year, they didn't induct Ted. It wasn't, I believe, until we decided we were going to have our own Black Distance Running Hall of Fame, and we announced that we were going to be inducting Ted. And 3 months later, the New York Road Runners Club decided they were also going to induct Ted.
Oh.
I mean, I was just, I don't know. I was at a loss for words. But again, with the Black Distance Running Hall of Fame, we want to promote the accomplishments of people such as John and Elisa, so that Black students, you know, can say, you know, well, if this person over here has done this, you know, that's something that I want to pursue. So that's one of the things as an organization, we truly want to be a resource for African-American distance runners. In fact, that's how John and I initially met. You remember that, John? John was looking at putting together, I think, a website of African-American distance runners, and someone told him about the Black Marathoners Association. So we
yeah, that in your book too, Tony, your book. It was your book as well. How, you talk about how you use running to overcome diabetes, and you said like use running to replace insulin, and I was amazed by your story, and I had to make sure that we connected. So I was trying to do all kinds of different things as well, more of which I'll be able to do because I think I'm a little bit older and a little bit wiser, understanding like how to go about doing things like this in the right way. But yeah, it was a lot of the work that you were doing and things that you were doing just as a runner, as a Black man and as a runner. And I was amazed because it was funny. It's hard to find those examples. It really was, especially, 10, 15 years ago. And that's crazy to think only 10 or 15 years ago. And it's still hard to find those examples even today. And you have to really, in terms of representation in the sport, there are amazing stories like all of ours, and yet they're not talked about enough. Mm-hmm. And so what you guys are doing at the National Black Marathoners Association is groundbreaking work, and it's unbelievably, the impact that it's going to have is obviously for generations to come. And it's just so cool to be alive to witness what you guys are doing and to be a part of it in some small way,
And Tony, I have to say, it's funny, I'll piggyback that, is that you mentioned how Ted Corbett was finally inducted into the Hall of Fame in New York City because you guys inducted him. Same thing happened to me. When you guys inducted me into the Hall of Fame, I finally got inducted into the USATF Masters Hall of Fame. Mind you, I'm 54, and I was in 2008 at 42, I ran 2:05, 800 meters, world best, whatever it was, record. And it took them all that time to finally induct me into the Hall of Fame. So it's just interesting.
Wow.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Tony.
Well, from all of your stories, it's clear that the National Black Marathoners Association has some pull, and the Hall of Fame that you've created, Tony, has some impact in terms of driving people to do certain things. And I want to kind of dive into that a little bit further with the time we have left. And John, we're also sensitive to your time here this evening, so if you have to jump off, no problem at all. But with the time we have left, Tony, tell us a little bit about the National Black Marathoners Association and what its mission is and what it's set up to do. And then, Elisa, I know you're a running coach as well, so I kind of want to get all of your perspective on, what you think can be done to provide resources and opportunities to build more sustainable Black runners, and just have more opportunities for Black runners to participate in the sport in a way that's sustainable. Because like all of you have talked about, it's been so impactful for your health and your fitness. So Tony, I'll start with you. Kind of what's the National Black Marathoners Association all about, and what do you feel is needed to have sustainable opportunities for Black people in running?
Okay, well, we are the nation's oldest and largest nonprofit organization devoted to the African American distance runners. Our mission has been to encourage African Americans to pursue a healthy lifestyle through long distance running and walking. When we initially started the organization, we had two objectives. One was to gather as many African Americans together as we can at a single location around the country, so that we could all meet up together and talk and go run marathons and half marathons and 5Ks and 10Ks. And by the way, even though we have the name marathon we have the word marathon in our name, we've always been open to all different types of runners for all different distances. In fact, the reason we put marathoner in there was because when we started, we knew that we were going to have a lot of backlash from the running community. And Charlotte, the other co-founder, and I had collectively run about 60 to 70 marathons. And from a naming perspective, we said, we're going to be in this for the long run, just like a marathoner. So we went ahead and put marathoner in our name. So again, our initial first objective was to gather as many African Americans as we could together. And of course, in that meeting, you're going to meet different people who could be your role models. Our second objective was to offer scholarships to high school distance runners. We have awarded over $40,000 in scholarships to high school distance runners. And several years ago, one of the runners sent us a letter after their freshman year thanking us for the scholarship. Now, bear in mind, we only gave the scholarship for their freshman year, but this letter was just, it truly pulled at our hearts. And the letter was written by Kayla Key, that I went back to the board and said, there's no reason in the world why we can't offer scholarships for all 4 years. You know, if everyone contributes just a little bit, we can make it happen. And so they ended up chipping in and doing that for all 4 years. This year was extremely special because our scholarship students weren't able to work due to COVID-19. You know, businesses had shut down. Their parents weren't able to work. And I reached out to our members and said, listen, you know, races are being canceled. I know all of you have a little bit of extra travel money from all those races that got canceled. Our students are in trouble. Can you step up and help? So this year we were able to award $3,000 to our students that are that are still in college. Again, you know, they stepped up. The third objective that we added was the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame. So every other year, we have the Hall of Fame banquet where we honor individuals such as John and Elisa. We induct individuals such as Dick Gregory. We inducted his brother, Ron Gregory, and just a whole slew of different distance runners. Some individuals, again, people have never heard of. To me, one of the most memorable events occurred when we gave an award to Ron Gregory, and he did his speech, he sat back down, and then he came back up to the podium. And he said, I just got to tell you this. He said, this is the first time I have been recognized for setting the national high school record for the mile. And he did this back in 1956. And 2019 was the first time he got recognized for. Yeah. We also have at that banquet, we also have what we call achievement awards. And with that, we recognize African-American runners or members who have, for example, completed marathons in all 50 states or half marathons in all 50 states, marathons or half marathons on all 7 continents, individuals who have completed 100 marathons or half marathons, ones who have qualified for the Boston Marathon, qualified for it and ran the Boston Marathon at least 3 times. It's an amazing meeting when you pull everyone together, because when you consider, a lot of us have never met another Black marathoner. Truth be told, from 1982 all the way till 2004, the only 2 Black marathoners I met were the 2 that I trained. You think about that, is a long time. And so now when you can get all these individuals in a room together and you get, you know, your Johns and Elisas in there, it's a magical moment. I remember after one of the Hall of Fame banquets, someone made a comment. They said, you know, as a Black distance runner, I can go and I can talk to a white audience. They can relate to me from the standpoint of being a distance runner, but they can't relate to the things that I've experienced. And they said they can go and they can talk to high school students and elementary school students. They can relate to the Black experience, but they can't really relate and embrace them as a distance runner. When they come to the Hall of Fame, many of them said that is the very first time they were in an environment where people could relate to them as an African American and can relate to the struggles of being a distance runner.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And Elisa and John, like Tony was saying, you both have experienced that, right? So you've felt some of what Tony's talking about in terms of that collection of people coming together for these banquets.
Absolutely.
Yes.
In closing us out today, and I want to thank all of you guys so much for your time. This is, I mean, Tony, I told you this when we first talked on the phone. 30 minutes isn't nearly enough. I need 6 hours with you, but we'll get that one of these days. But because I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge, and you got a whole bunch of great stories from your time in the running community. But you know, we've talked about representation, and all of you have talked about the power of having other Black runners to look up to. Tony, you just shared the power of the community and bringing all these accomplished folks together and being able to tell the stories of these, you know, amazing Black runners and their accomplishments and what that could mean to the community at large. I know this can sometimes be a tiring question for Black people to answer when somebody's coming to you and saying, what can the running community at large do, right? It's not up to the people that are being impacted to come up with the solutions. It's up to everybody else. But do you all have any perspective from, being so deeply involved with the running community on some things you'd like to see from the running community at large that could make it a more supportive environment for Black runners? And Elisa, maybe I'll start with you.
Oh, thank you for that one. I think it might go into the direction of I'd like to see more coaching. I know when I coach, things are different. When I coach a team, they're looking at me like, whoa, she's our coach. It's kind of when I get a high school group together, or even my college girls, they respond because in many ways I'm just like them. I'm not coming from an authority. I'm in the same race. I'm the same kind of active female or whatnot, and I actually will run with them and that kind of thing. But it gives, if you have more people that are just like the people that are trying to pursue something, it just makes it calmer and easier and more doable, because life is easier when it's not stressed or you're the only one and it's should I do this or not. You feel like my athletes felt more comfortable, and I had a lot of success with the ones I had. And I have a quick story is for once I was coaching a high school girl. She was an African American girl, immensely talented, but she kept getting in trouble, meaning that she would be late to practice, or she might talk back a little bit. But really what it was is that she wasn't really being understood. She was in a predominantly white school. She was being raised by her aunts. So you could tell it was just all because of her life, how things unfolded. And it wasn't her, but boy, she was talented. So when I became the coach, I had more patience with her, and I allowed her to be a little late. And then I talked with her a little longer. She needed economic help. So I had a way to get her some new track spikes and new shoes, because it gets costly. And she was my star sprinter on the 4x4 when we won the state. She also qualified for the 1 and 200, and she went to college and ran at school. So there was a story that could have gone way different if I didn't have that extra little patience and understanding and didn't see her as the other, perhaps.
Great example and great story. John, over to you.
Yeah, I took some time to think about this because you did kind of share this as a potential question. I'll try to keep my answer very brief. In all honesty, I think one of the most important things that I could imagine happening is within the running community is to see the white runners actually getting outside of their comfort zone and connecting with their Black coworkers, their Black neighbors. If you are a white runner, reach out to those that you have not reached out to before that are Black. I think that it's an interesting thing, the power of running. We said, you mentioned to me the power of running. I believe running can save the world. I believe sports can save the world because it's a connecting thing. It's a bridge, between different cultures, different people, different races, different genders. It's a bridge. And, I know that we're all missing it due to COVID-19. We're missing sports. The world seems very empty without it. And I don't think that I don't really think we realize until now how powerful sports really is and how much we've taken it for granted. I think that white runners need to consider using the sport that they love, the sport that has transformed their life as a tool to build a bridge and to build a connection and to strengthen a relationship and a bond with their Black friends, coworkers, neighbors, and to open up a dialogue that they have not had. Not with those individuals, but also with themselves, and you got to find a common denominator. And I think the sport of running, as we all know, is unbelievably powerful when it comes to transformation and being transformative. So it's an invitation. I invite more white runners to do something, because it isn't just on Black runners. It's on all of us in the running community to do something. And honestly, do something that you're not comfortable with, because we've been uncomfortable for a very long time. So I don't care if it's uncomfortable at this point. You need to do something about it. And if you truly do care, reach out. We'll meet you halfway, but you need to reach out.
Tony, over to you for the final word.
Okay, I'm going to piggyback off of what John said, and that is doing something that may feel uncomfortable. As a nonprofit organization, do something uncomfortable and make a donation. We've had
Right.
programs in place where we have seen the major impacts of the programs we have in the African American community. I said I'm on the board of directors of the Dallas Marathon. To Elisa's comment about coaching, we partnered with them as well as with the RRCA, and we ended up training about 10 to 15 African American distance running coaches here in the Dallas area. And part of the condition for them getting the training was they had to volunteer for a year, leading different run groups, coaching different individuals, coaching groups. And as a result of that, now, for example, at one of the churches here in Dallas, every year they have a marathon and a half marathon training program. This is a Black church. And every year they end up training 30 to 40 runners to participate in the Dallas Marathon. There's a social media running group here of African Americans that has about 200 to 300 African Americans meeting to go for group runs. And again, this is as a result of people making donations to us, and then we're in turn, we're taking this money and using it to train and certify African American distance running coaches. Again, you know, when you're being coached by someone who looks like you, you're more likely to do better.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great tie-in to bring back, you know, what Elisa was talking about before, and kind of a direct action that we could take to help that development. So it's great to hear, Tony, that that's something that you guys are invested in. For all three of you, I just want to thank you guys so much. Your perspective has been invaluable. It's been really interesting because you all, you know, I mean, there's not a universal Black experience. While there's certain similar things you've all talked about, everyone's experience is your experience. I appreciate all of you sharing that candidly with us today. I guess one more time before we sign off, is there anything we didn't touch on, anything that you guys feel like you wanted to give voice to that we didn't have a chance to mention today? John, I know you're on the tightest timeline of all of us here, so I'll give it over to you first.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say it's a pleasure to hear your story, Elisa. What an honor to see your beautiful face and to hear your voice and your story. And congratulations on what an amazing career you've had thus far as you continue on your journey. But what an honor and a pleasure to meet you. You're a beautiful person. So
Thank you.
That's great. And of course, Tony, it's always great to see you. I love everything that you've done. And I really do want to do more to support the National Black Marathoners Association. So I will be making a significant push going forward to help raise money and to, especially for the scholarships, your scholarship fund. But I hope, and I want to encourage everybody in the running community to embrace your organization. I think that the work that you're doing, it's not just for Black runners, it really is doing so much for our community, especially Black runners. And that's so important. And I can't thank you enough to you and everybody that's been a part of launching and raising and maintaining and growing that organization. And I, again, want to make sure that I state very clearly that I want everybody in the running community to get behind what you guys are doing. It deserves the support, and it makes a difference to the entire community as a whole. So thank you so much for that, man.
Okay. Thanks.
Tony, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yes, as I was thinking about that, I think that if people would just be more open and more accepting, when a Black runner comes to your training program, embrace them. Don't kind of look at them like, well, this person isn't going to be here very long, so, why in the world should I spend time with this person? But, embrace the person, accept them, and you would be surprised, the person may be a diamond in the rough.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think, one common thread with everybody we've spoken today is building authentic relationships. You can only support and help and understand people who you know. That's definitely part of what all of you have said. Elisa, any final thoughts from you? Anything we didn't cover? Anything that you feel like you wanted to share?
I think mostly it's been covered wonderfully. John, thank you for those wonderful words of, what do you call that? Yes. I actually, the funny thing is that Tony, I had not heard of John. I'm so embarrassed. See how you don't know about folks?
Sure.
But I looked at your bio and man, you were UCLA, you go. And,
thank you.
And Tony, yes, that banquet was absolutely, I was in awe the whole time. Like, what?
Yep.
Black African marathoners? You know, it was amazing. So thank you for that. And you keep doing, and it's been a great opportunity to say some things I've wanted to say. Yeah, I think it's going to be better if people just simply, yes, come out of their comfort zone and enjoy what they're doing. Understand that running does make you feel better, and we all enjoy it, and you can do it the same even no matter what your skin color.
Exactly.
It's a great way to close this out. Well, we just want to thank everybody so much who was part of this panel today. It's really been invaluable to listen to your perspective. We hope everybody in the audience will take time to listen to this. We've got a wealth of knowledge here on our screen, and I know I personally learned a lot, not just talking to you all today, but over the last week, getting to talk to each of you individually, learn a little bit more about your story. So, hopefully for us, this is just the beginning of the conversation, the beginning of action. I think we've gotten a lot of great perspectives on how, the running community at large can be better allies and better supporters of Black distance runners. So now it's on all of us to take the wise words that you've all imparted on us and push that into action. But again, I wanted to thank all of you so much for giving up your time and sharing your perspective with us today.